Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Bobble on Talmud. Welcome back to Bobble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chaf Aleph, Daf 21 of Masechta Sukkah. We're going to start today the second parak of Masechta Sukkah. Don't worry, it doesn't get any easier. We are going. Okay, so the second parak starts off talking about sleeping under a bed inside of a sukkah. Along the way, there's a very, very fascinating kind of Gemara. I think it's really just a Mishnah, actually. But regarding Paraduma, super interesting. There are some interesting things along the way. And then we get to another Mishnah at the end of the daf about making a sukkah on like a bed. Fun times. All right, let's start on the Daf Chaf Amud Beis. Cool. New parak. Hayoshin tachsamita b'sukkah leyotzei dechavaso. Wow. Says the Tanakama, a fellow sleeps under his bed in a sukkah, not yotzei. Not yotzei. You can't sleep under your bed in a sukkah because your bed is an ohel, and you have to be sleeping in the sukkah, not in a ohel in the sukkah. You have to be sleeping in the sukkah itself. So therefore you cannot sleep under your bed in the sukkah. Amar Yehuda says Yehuda nohagana she'inu yishenim tachsamita b'fnei azkenim v'lamru lanu davar. Says Yehuda that we would actually sleep under our beds in a sukkah in front of the elders. Who are the elders? Maybe like Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel. I don't know. Anyways, so it says Rabbi Yehuda that they would sleep under the sukkah in front of under their bed in the sukkah in front of the elders. They didn't seem to have a problem with it. So Rabbi Yehuda seems to be saying that there's no problem sleeping under a bed in your sukkah. Okay. Rabbi Shimon argues on Rabbi Yehuda, and he says, that there was a story with Tevi, the servant of Rabbi Gamliel. Now we had said in Masechta Yom, I believe, that Tevi was dafka ro'ui to get smicha. He was on the level that he was mamish able to be a rabbi. So now Tevi, the servant of Rabbi Gamliel, but he was an Eved Kanaini. He was a Gentile slave. Shayoshin tachsamita, that he was sleeping, that Itaka slept under a bed in a sukkah. And Rabbi Gamliel said to the elders, he was very proud of his servant Tevi. Re'isim Tevi Avdi Shu Talmud Chacham. You see, my Tevye, my servant Tevi, he's a big Talmud Chacham. And he knows that slaves are potter from the sukkah. And to demonstrate that he does not have a mitzvah of sukkah, that he's potter min sukkah, he's sleeping under a bed. And says Reb Shimon that from that anecdote with Rabbi Gamliel and Tevi we learned that a fellow sleeps under a bed in a sukkah, he is not fulfilling his obligation of sleeping in a sukkah, as we see that because Tevi was potter from sleeping in a sukkah, he slept under the bed in the sukkah, so that by sleeping under the bed, Mimele, he won't be Yotzei Schiv of sukkah, which is then Akasha and Rabbi Yehuda, who says that you are allowed to sleep under your bed in a sukkah. Weiter. Okay, one second. What's the problem with sleeping under a bed? A bed is less than 10 tefachim off the ground. Period. So says Shmuel, we're talking about a bed that is 10 tefachim tall. So it is talking oil. Fine. Now that we got that out of the way, Tanan awesome. Okay, we learned in a Mishnah. Where's this Mishnah? Ohalos. Fun times. So we learned in a Mishnah in Ohalos. Whether we're talking about a hole that was dug by water, like, I don't know, imagine you have like the side of an embankment of like a river or something, and like the water kind of like ate away at some of the embankment, and now there's like a crevice of sorts, and like you can go inside the crevice. So imagine if in that crevice there is a kazayis mibsar ames, would that be considered an ohel? Haha, fun times. Shrotzim, or what if the crevice was like creviced out by shrotzim things? Achalasu mlachas, or if it was just like eaten away by corrosive minerals. And similarly a row of stones, like a wall of stones, or some kind of like, I don't know, hole made out of like a stack of beams or something. In all these cases, if there's a roof, if these like spaces made by these corrosive materials or water or shrotzim, if there's an area that's made, we don't care how it was made. If it was eaten by the mouse, and now the mouse ate a hole, and now there's a roof on it, and there's exais b'bsar so all that stuff, well, that's going to be a tumah. That's going to be an ohel. Mahil ala tumah. It's going to make an ohel on the tumah, and it's going to, whatever ramifications that has. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, listen up, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is, Kol ohel she'eno asu bidei adam eno ohel. For something to be considered an ohel, it has to be man-made. If it's made by the water eating away at the bank of the river, no, that can't make an ohel. It has to be man-made in order to be an ohel. My time in Rabbi Yehuda. How come Rabbi Yehuda says this? Yalif ohel mi mishkan. Yitaka learns a gzer shava from the Mishkan. It says by tumas ha'ohel zosator adam kiyomus ba'ohel. It says that this is the Torah of a fellow who dies in an ohel. And it says by what? By the Mishkan, that he spread out the ohel, which was basically the second layer of the Mishkan, on top of the first layer of the Mishkan. Just like by the Mishkan, it was humans who spread out the tent. So also by a tumas ohel, or really, yeah. So we're talking about an ohel that was man-made, not just made by the world, by what do we say? By the universe. All right, let's go weiter. Where are we? V'Rabbanan, and the rabbis who say that no, even an ohel made by the universe is considered an ohel. Ohel riba. Well, it says ohel a whole bunch of times in the context of para, and para is in the context of tumasa ohel, kilu tumasa meis. So therefore, ohel riba. It says ohel a whole bunch of times to include all sorts of ohels, even an ohel made by the universe. Okay, let's go weiter. V'savar Rabbi Yehuda kol ohel she'enu asu b'dei adam eno ohel. Does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that an ohel needs to be man-made? Chevra, you listening? Listen to this. V'aminu, we have a contradiction. It's going to blow your mind. Chatzeres hayu b'nuyos b'Yerushalayim. There were courtyards in Yerushalayim. Al gabe asela, and these courtyards were built on top of stone. They were built on a stone ground, on stone surface. V'tachteim chalol, and underneath the stone surface was space, was hollow. V'pnei kever atahom, so that just in case underneath the stone is buried a dead body, a corpse, it should be hollow, the stone should be hollow, or there should be space between the ground and the stone, so that just in case underneath the stone there is a body buried, a corpse buried, the space will create an ohel, and then the stone will basically be the roof of the ohel, and then the chutzner that's built on top of it won't have any issues of tumah, because the tumah won't go above the roof of the ohel into the chutzner that's built on top of it. Okay, so basically it'll be a quarantine space, impossible for it to become tamei. nasham ubaros v'yoldos sham, and pregnant women would come to this chutzner and birth their children there. I guess their sons. Umigadlos b'neim v'para, and they would raise their children there for the para aduma. Now, for the para aduma, remember we learned at the beginning of Masechta Yoma that, what did we say that Shivas Yomim, what was it? Or maybe, yeah, that when it came to now I'm forgetting. No, what did we say? That for 7 days before the Parah Aduma, the Kohen Gadol would separate or something like that. But right, basically we said that when it comes to Parah Aduma, there would be extra care taken. They would only use like stone vessels and stuff. Like there was extra purity surrounding the person preparing to burn the Parah Aduma. And that's because there was a machlokas between the Perushim and the Tzdukim. That the Tzdukim would hold that the person who burnt the Parah Aduma, Davka, had to be completely pure. It can't be a Tvul Yom. The Perushim, right, the rabbinic Yidden, so they learn out, right, the Tzdukim didn't hold of Torah Sheba'al Peh. We who hold of Torah Sheba'al Peh, so we had a limud that even a Tvul Yom can burn the Parah Aduma. And therefore, we didn't want anybody to take the activity of burning the Parah Aduma lightly. So therefore, so we say that the person Dafka becomes Tameh on the day that he goes to burn the Parah, right? The person who's going to burn the Parah Aduma, we Dafka make him into a Tvul Yom, and we have him burn the Parah Aduma as a Tvul Yom just to drive the point home that a Tvul Yom is allowed to burn the Parah Aduma. However, because we have a Tvul Yom burning the Parah Aduma, we don't want anybody to take the mitzvah of Parah Aduma lightly. So therefore, everything else surrounding the avodah of burning the Parah Aduma was done with the utmost of purity. To the extent that what we see in this Mishnah is that women would give birth to their sons. What if it was a daughter? I don't know. Did they have, what are those things called? Where you can like see the baby beforehand? I don't know. Ultrasound. I don't know if they had ultrasound. So the women would give birth to their sons in the chatzar. They would have these chatzeris which were completely tahor, built on the stone and mamish, completely tahor place. And these women would give birth to their sons there and raise them, not for their whole life, but until they were maybe 7 or 8 years old or something. I think Rashi says so that, until the age where they might see Keri, where they might become Tomei with Tumas Keri. So until 7, 8 years old, something like that, whatever it was, that's what they determined. And they would raise their children dartin. Umevin shvarim, and then when it came time to fill up water for the Parah Aduma, so they would bring oxen, v'agabein dlasos, and on top of the oxen there were doors. V'tinokos yoshvin agabein, and the children would sit on these doors. So just in case while they're traveling, in case there was any dead body buried anywhere, well, the door that they're sitting on will basically make an ohel between the ground and the door, and they're on top of the door, so they'll remain tahor. V'chosas shel even biyaden, and they would take these stone cups with them. Higiu l'shiloach, they would get to the shiloach stream. Yardu l'soch hamayim, they would then get off the ox and go into the water. Umil and fill up these stone vessels with water. And then they would go back onto the door on top of the ox. Rabbi Yossi Omer says, Rabbi Yossi, says Rabbi Yossi, look, we can't allow these children to get off of these doors, because what if there's a dead body, between the door and and where they fill up the water at the shiloach? That would be a waste of all this effort of the past 7 years raising this kid for this one task. So therefore, says Rabbi Yossi, actually he wouldn't even get off of the door. He would just somehow lower the water, the pitcher into the water from the door, and that's how he would fill it up. So he doesn't take any risks of there being any potential dead body buried anywhere that he might, cover and make an ohel over. Wow. Vitanya, and we learn in a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda lo hayu meviin dlasos. Says Rabbi Yehuda, nah, you didn't have to put the door on top of the ox. That was unnecessary. El shvarim, you would just use this the ox. So kilu, they would use these special oxes that have very broad, very wide stomachs, bellies, whatever. They're very wide oxen. And So then the children would sit on top of these oxen, and the ox themselves, right? There's space between the belly of the ox and the ground, and that would be more than a tefach, and the ox itself would create the ohel that was necessary to shield these children from any tumah that might be underneath them, from any corpse that might be buried underneath them on the way to filling up the water. Just 1 second. But 1 second. An ox, if we're saying that the children can sit directly on the ox, Rabbi Yehuda is saying that children can sit directly on the ox, because the ox will make the ohel. And in case the ox walks over any buried body that we don't know about, well, the ox created a separation between the corpse and where the child is sitting. So that's an ohel. But the ox was not made by man. The ox was made by the universe. The ox was made by its mother. And yet, Vikatani Rabbi Yehuda, nonetheless Rabbi Yehuda is saying, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Lo hayu mevi'in delasos. You didn't need to bring a door, el shvarim, it was enough to just rely upon the ox. So we see that apparently, Rabbi Yehuda says that even an ohel made by the universe, such as an ox, is considered an ohel. Ha ha! Kios Reb Dimi. When Reb Dimi came, Amr Belazar, he says the name of Reb Belazar, Moder Reb Yehuda, that Reb Yehuda admits, Kimlo Egrof, that if the space between the ground and the ohel is like a fist, meaning not like a tefach, but a little more than a tefach, like a bigger, more geschmacke fist from like a big guy. So if it's the size of an egrof, so then even if it's made by the universe, it can be considered an ohel. And therefore in the Mishnah in Ohelos, where it says that, like, if you have the side of the riverbank that was like, etched out by water or something like that, so it does not make an ohel. That's because Rabbi Yehuda says that was made by the universe, and it also was only like the size of a tefach, but not an egrof. But if it says the size of an egrof, then even if it was made by the universe, it would be considered an ohel. Tananami Achi, we talk in a brayso like this. Umod Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda admits b'shkifin uv'nekike asloim, with uprooted boulders and rock crevices. Okay, and I guess that those were like the size of an egrof, and I guess Rabbi Yehuda says that that's an acceptable ohel, even though it is made by the universe. Sounds very beautiful. V'arei delis diyeshba kame egrofin v'katani Rabbi Yehuda omer lo hayu mevin delasos el shvarim. But 1 second, if Rabbi Yehuda says that as long as there are multiple egrofs, as long as there's the size of like an egrof, so then even if it's made by the universe, it would be considered an ohel, right? And that as long as there's the size of an egrof, it's memele and ohel. But I don't understand. So what's Rabbi Yehuda's problem with the door? Rabbi Yehuda says that they wouldn't use the door. They would use the ox. What's wrong with the door? There's plenty of egrofs, plenty of fists between the floor and where the door is on top of the ox. What's his problem with the door? Says Abai, no, what it means is that you don't need to bring a door, because after all, you could just rely on the ox itself, because it was a wide ox, and there's more than a egrof between the ground and the belly of the ox, and therefore we could say that we could just rely upon the ox for the ohel, but you don't need to rely upon the door. That's not necessary. So that's how Abai explains it according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rava Amar, whereas Rava says, Lo hayu mevin delasos kol ikar. No, says Rava, actually, they would not use a door according to Rabbi Yehuda. How come? Shemipnei shedaito shotino gasa olav. That, well, since a child who's sitting on a door, he'll feel comfortable. Shemayotzi rosho o echad meivar v'yitma b'kevrat home. If the child feels too comfortable on top of the ox, on top of the door, so then he might stick out his hand and have a little fun. After all, fun is relative when you grew up in a quarantined space on top of a stone that had a space under it just in case. Oh my gosh, I wonder what that was like. Anyways, you want to have a little fun. Finally, you get out of this little chutzner for the first time in your life, and you're riding on this ox on a door, the wind blowing in your face, and all you want to do is stick your hand out the door and live a little. But Lemaisa, if you live a little, you might be making an ohel on a kever home, and so we can't let you live a little. And therefore, says Rava, that's why Rabbi Yehuda says that you cannot use a door, because then you might feel too comfortable. And that is why Rabbi Yehuda says, or Rava explains Rabbi Yehuda, that you have to sit directly on the ox, and you cannot use the door. Tanya Kavose de Rave, and we have a brisa supporting Rava's assertion that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you may not use the door, you have to sit directly on the ox. Rabbi Yehuda almost says, Rabbi Yehuda, lo hayumaviin dlasos kol ikr. You would not use a door, mipnei shedaito shotino kasa olav, because then maybe the child will be too comfortable on the door. Shemayotzi rosho o echad meivar v'yitma, maybe he'll stick out his head, or one of his limbs, and become tamei b'kevratom, if he kind of sticks out his head or his limb or one of his limbs over a unknown grave. El mavin shvarim mitzrim. Rather, they would bring these Egyptian oxen, shekresosei and rechavos, that they had these broad bellies, and you would be atinokos yoshvin agabein, and the children would sit on top of the broad ox. V'kosis shel even biodein, with these stone cups in their hands. Igu the shiloach. Once they got to the shiloach, yardu umilaum, they would go and fill up these stone utensils. Va'alu v'yashvu, kalim, whatever. Va'alu v'yashvu lo in agabein, and then they would sit back on top of the ox. All right, sounds pretty fun. There you go. Frekta Gemara, varemita diyesh ba kamegrofim. Befrekta Gemara. Wait a second. What did we say in our Mishnah? We said in our Mishnah, Vitnan, we said in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Nohagina yinu shayinu yishenim tachsamita b'fnei zkenim. Says Rabbi Yehuda that they would take a sleep in the sukkah under a bed. And that was considered okay. But one second, there's a few egg ropes between the floor and the bed, which would mean that based on what we're saying, Rabbi Yehuda would consider that to be a proper ohel, and therefore, if it's a proper ohel, you shouldn't be able to sleep in that ohel in the sukkah. And yet Rabbi Yehuda is saying that, all the time we would sleep under the bed in the sukkah. How could that be? Then you're sleeping in an ohel in the sukkah. So, and for the Gemara, shayni mita l'gaba asuya. So the Gemara says, well, a bed is actually a little bit different, because a bed, you're not really supposed to go under the bed. You're supposed to go on top of the bed. So therefore, under the bed isn't really considered a proper ohel. Fekti Gemara, shvarim nami l'gaba asuyim. But one second, how could we say that the ox makes an ohel between the ground and the child? Underneath the ox, the underneath the ox isn't meant for a tent. So ki also Ravin Amr Belazar. So when Ravin came, he said the name of Belazar, shiny shvarim, that actually when it comes to oxen, holam eginim ala roim bechamim pnei achamim v'gsham pnei agsham. Ho. All right. I'm no shepherd. But it says that apparently a shepherd puts his head under an ox in the winter to protect himself from the rain, and in the summer to protect himself from the sun. I didn't know that. I don't know. If we have any shepherds in Babylon Talmud, maybe you can confirm that in the summer you stick your head under the ox, and in the winter you stick your head under the ox. All right. Seems unnatural to me, but again, I'm not a shepherd. I'm a computer guy. I just stay at home and drink coffee. That's my thing. But technically speaking, a bed also, you put your shoes and stuff under the bed. So technically, you do use under the bed. If an ox is considered an old because you stick your head under it, so then your bed mistama is also going to be considered an old because you put your shoes under it. Ela Rava says, Rava shiny shvarim Okay. Well, no, oxen are different because they like their back protects their intestines. All right. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "Oru vaser talbisheni," that you adorn me with hide and flesh. Uvat someone's vegidim tisochecheni, and you cover me with my bones and my sinews. V'bay seimor, if you want to say Rabbi Yehuda the Taime, that Rabbi Yehuda is according to his reasoning to Amar Sukkah diras keva ba'inon. Okay, of course we know that Rabbi Yehuda holds that Sukkah needs to be a permanent structure, right? We say that Sukkah can be 20 amas tall. V'havale mita diras arai, and a bed at best is just a temporary dwelling. You could just move it very easily. V'sukkah oel keva, and Sukkah then is a permanent ohel. V'lo asi oel arai m'vato oel keva, and a temporary dwelling, a temporary ohel of the bed is not going to be mevatel, to nullify the permanent dwelling of the permanent oil of the sukkah. For Reb Shimon Damar Nami Sukkah diras keva ba'inon, but Reb Shimon also holds that you need to have a permanent structure, right? As we said the other day, right? 2 weeks ago or something. That that according to, I think, Rav Masna, Rabbi Shimon said, Rabbi Shimon says, right, we had the machlokes between the Chacham and Rabbi Shimon about, is a sukkah 3 walls or 4 walls? Rabbi Masna said that's, and Rabbi Shimon says 4 walls. Rabbi Masna said it's because it has to protect you from like the elements. So we want to say that because of that, Rabbi Shimon also holds that it has to be a permanent structure. V'asi ol arai u'mvato ol keva. So then, right, and we see that Reb Shimon says that you're not allowed to sleep under the bed, right? In our Mishnah, Reb Yehuda says, what do you mean? We would sleep under the beds and there was no problem. Reb Shimon says that, no, we see from the story with Rabban Gamliel and Tevi that you're not allowed to sleep under a bed in the sukkah. So both Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda agree that a sukkah needs to be a diras keva, and yet Reb Yehuda says, well, because the sukkah needs to be a diras keva, the bed, which is a diras arai, will not be mevatel the diras keva, and therefore you could sleep under the bed. But if Reb Shimon also says that a sukkah needs to be a diras keva, shouldn't he have the same logic that sleeping under the bed should be no problem because the bed is arai and the sukkah is keva, and the arai will be mevatel the keva? So the Gemara says, "Baha plige." This is exactly the machlokas between Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda about, do you say that an ol arai will be mevatel an ol keva? My sover asu ol arai mevatel ol keva. That's b'diuk the machlokas. That Reb Shimon says that a temporary ohel, in fact, can be mevatel the permanent ohel, and therefore you may not sleep under your bed according to Reb Shimon because your bed is going to be mevatel the sukkah, and that's a problem. Says Yehuda, nah, ma pitom, the bed cannot, right? The temporary ohel of the bed cannot be mevatel the permanent ohel of the sukkah, and therefore gezuntehei, you can sleep under the bed in the sukkah. Amr Reb Shimon Ma'aseh b'Tevi Avdo. The Mishnah then continued and said that Reb Shimon said this story about Tevi, the servant of Rabban Gamliel. Tanya, we take a learn in a brayso. Amr Reb Shimon, says Reb Shimon Misichaso Rabban Gamliel Lomadnu Shnei Devarim. Says Reb Shimon that from the speech, the informal anecdote said over by Rabban Gamliel, we learned 2 things. Number 1, Lamanu Shavadim Ptur Min HaSukkah. We learned that Avadim, slaves, are potter from, right? Avadim Knanim are potter from Sukkah. V'Lamanu Shayoshin Tachas Amita Liyotzei De Chovasom. We also learned that by sleeping under the bed, you are not Yotzei your Chiyuv, and therefore, right, Tevi slept under the bed, A, because he's an Eved Knani, who's potter from Sukkah, and B, because sleeping under a bed is, you're not Yotzei your Chova. V'Lema Midvar of Shama Gamliel. How come we said from the Sicha, from sort of the informal speech of Rabban Gamliel? Why not just say from the words, from the formal speech of Rabban Gamliel? So listen to this. Milsa agav orche kamashmalan. That, sure, we could have just said from the words of Rabban Gamliel, but we wanted to teach something, another taich. What's the other taich? Ki ada amr of Achabar Ada v'armila amr of Achabar Ada amr of Amnuna amr Rab. How do you know that you can even learn something from the just ordinary speech of a Talmud Chacham? Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "Valeu lo yibol," that the pasuk says, what does the pasuk say? right? That a tzaddik will, right? So part of the description of the tzaddik, it says, Valeu lo yibol. Even his leaves, right? It says will be like a great tree, and his leaves won't wither. Even his leaves won't wither. A leaf that's very light and very very light and kind of like blows in the wind. So even the light talk of a Talmud Chacham is significant. Gewaldig. Says the Mishnah, okay, sounds very nice. So now, says the Tanakama that, okay, imagine you have Lamaisa, a bed, and the bed has like a board by your feet and by your head. Kilu, it like goes like mamish, a board, like it goes from the ground and like up, like. And I guess in this case, at least 10 tefachim, right? So you have a board by the feet and a board by your head, and you put schach on it. Sounds fun, right? So your bed is kind of, again, you have like this bed, but instead of just like 4 poles on the bed, you actually have like 2 like walls almost, like by your feet and one by your feet, one by your head, and then you put schach on top, and lamaise, your bed is now your sukkah. So if you put the schach on these like bed boards that you have, kshera, it's a kosher sukkah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says Rabbi Yehuda, if it's unable to stand independent of the bed, so then it's going to be a pasul sukkah, because the bed is movable, right? I mean, if you just put schach on top of your bed, you can move the bed, and that makes it arai, right? And it says Rabbi Yehuda, you need to have a sukkah that's keva, and it can't just be movable. So it's not going to work. You actually have to like put it on like proper things that are dug in the ground. My time with Rabbi Yehuda. So how come, the truth is actually, we're going to see it's machlokas. So it says the Gemara, what's pshat with Rabbi Yehuda? How come he says that you're not allowed to just put schach on top of this bed? Pligi bar Reb Zera Reb Abba bar Mamel. We talk about machlokas Reb Zera and Reb Abba bar Mamel. Chad omer mipnei she'ein lo keva, v'chad omer mipnei she'mamida b'davar mekabel tuma. So one man the omer is that Rabbi Yehuda says that the sukkah has to be right dir, as we were just talking about. Rabbi Yehuda says sukkah has to be a diras keva, and a bed is not a diras keva. You move it around, so therefore it's just going to be a pasul sukkah. The other way of understanding is that the bed is a kli; it's makabel tuma, and you don't even want to support the schach on something that's makabel tuma. I don't know. Very interesting. Okay, fine. My benayu, what's an afkamina kagon shenat shvuden shal barzel v'sikech aleim? Well, what if you were to take, skewers, pegs of iron, and put it like over the this bed, and put the schach on that? So if you say it's about, it has to be permanent, well, now it's permanent. You took iron bars and you dug them to the ground and put schach on top of that. But if you say that the issue is that the bed is makabel tuma and you can't put the schach rested on something that's makabel tuma, well, by putting it on the metal bars, you're not going to help anything because the metal bar is makabel tuma. Abaye says Abaye Loshanu Samach says Abaye, the problem with the bed is specifically, meaning in explaining Rabbi Yehuda, he says the problem with the bed is specifically that you're putting the schach directly on the bed. But if you just were to take some structure and build it around the bed and put the schach on top of that structure, and it happens to be on top of the bed, well then it's okay. My time outcome, well the mandamar the fishein lo keva. Well, according to mandamar that says that it's not keva, reish lo keva. Now it's kavua because you made it properly, over the bed. You're not just attaching it to the bed, which is movable. You're like building it around the bed. Like you're building like proper like supports around the bed and putting the schach on top of that. And as long as what you're putting the schach on top of is not makabel tuma, so then there's no issue of the makabel tuma anymore. So that's that. Chevra, that was daf Chaf Aleph of Masechta Sukkah. We began the new parak. We began the second parak of Masechta Sukkah. We had the discussion about can you sleep under a bed in the sukkah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, yes, you can, and he says we would even do it all the time in front of the rabbis. According to Rabbi Shimon, you may not sleep under a sukkah, under a bed in a sukkah, and he brought a proof from a story with Tevi, the servant of Rabbi Gamliel, who Taka slept under a bed in the sukkah, so to demonstrate that he's pater from, or really because he was pater from the mitzvah of sukkah, so therefore he slept in a bed, under a bed in the sukkah, because by doing so, he would not be yotzei his chiyuv. We then discussed Rabbi Yehuda's opinion when it comes to making an ohel. Initially, we had said that according to Rabbi Yehuda, a proper ohel must be man-made. We then extended that definition to say that a proper ohel can even be made by the universe if the space is larger than an egrof, like this kind of larger fist, even so much as the size of like somebody's face or something. And then we saw this extremely interesting Mishnah from Masechta Para that there were these children in the context of the extreme levels of purity that we would go to in the context of the Para Aduma, they would be raised in these chutzers that were mamish just completely tahor, and they would go to great lengths to make sure that these children remain tahor in order to do this one job of bringing the water for the Para Aduma. We had this beautiful Gemara there at some point, towards right before the next Mishnah, which said that even from the sort of simple talk of the Talmidei Chacham, there's what to learn from, which is very interesting. And then we got to this other Mishnah which says that putting a schach on top of your bed, the Tanna Kama says it's fine, there's no problem with that. But Rabbi Yehuda says, look, you cannot do it. We saw machlokas between Rabbi Zera and Rabbi Abba Bar Mamel, what Rabbi Yehuda's problem is. One man the Amar is, well, in the sukkah needs to be a diras keva, and a bed is in a diras keva. And the other man the Amar is that, well, the bed is makabel tumah, we don't even want you to put schach on top of something that's makabel tumah. Very interesting opinion. Alright, well, that was the Chaf Aleph Masechta Sukkah. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day. Cheers.